Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, and cast through the lens of sacred reading practices. Today, we are jumping on to talk about Campaign 1, Episode 24, Part 1, and joining me today is Petall.
Hello.
Yes, we are doing very informal today because I am not at my own house and Petall's getting over a cold, so we're going to do our best.
Yep. So please excuse if my voice sounds weird or if my memories of the episode are not as strong as usual.
That's okay. We can have a little bit of a loopy episode today. I mean, I think that's slowly becoming our brand image anyway, is loopy.
I think so. All those tangents that we run off on.
Yes, we're just running on fumes. All right, so the icebreaker for today is, what is your favorite candle scent?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question, because here's a fun fact about me. I don't have a very strong sense of smell. I can smell things, but I just can't smell things as strongly as other people, so smells don't have as strong of an impact on me. This is especially true right now when I have a cold. Now I can't smell anything at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did have a candle once that I really, really like. I don't know what actually made up the scent of it. But it was called Sparkling Amber was the scent that it had been given. And my parents had got it for me for Christmas one year because that's like the name that I use in real life is Amber. And I don't know whether it's just the like bias of it being like having been my name or whether it's like actually a scent that I really like. I think it's a mix of the two. I wish I knew what it was because I missed that candle and I would love to try to get another candle that smells like it.
Yeah. I mean, just based on the description, I'm thinking like warm, toasty smells, like maybe fire in there somewhere. I don't know. I'm completely guessing.
I'm really not sure. Like I said, with if I had a better sense of smell, I would be able to pick up the distinctive sense within it. But because I don't have a good sense of smell, it's just a smell, and I can't tell what's making it up.
Yeah. I feel that. I typically go for pine scents. I'm a big pine person. That's actually one of the things that I love about living in the Pacific Northwest. Like in the fall time, the air literally smells like pine when you're walking around. So I tend towards pine candles primarily. Like, I'm not really a floral type of girl. Like, I do floral for like perfume, but not necessarily for my home environment, because florals are hard to dial in. Like, you can get way too like potpourri-y with floral scents, and I like the pine. So like firs, spruce, regular pine. Yeah, that's my jam.
Nice. Pine is a good scent. It always reminds me of Christmas because my family always got like real trees growing up. And so I can smell the smell of the Christmas tree. Like, it reminds me of Christmas trees, and it's a good warm fuzzy feeling.
Yeah, it is. My family had a tradition of the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday in the US, instead of doing the whole like shopping bonanza thing that everyone always did, we took a yearly pilgrimage to the Christmas tree farm and cut down our own Christmas tree as a family. And when I was in high school, we were all hungover the next day. And we would stop at Panera Bread on the way out there and get like, bagels, coffee, everything for the hangover. And then like, the five of us would be like grousing and cursing. Trudging through the mud of the Christmas tree farm. And we have really tall ceilings when I was growing up, so we had to get like 10-foot trees, and those things are fucking heavy. Trying to drag those across the entire farm with 5 hungover people. I mean, good stories.
Yeah, those sound like some really exciting memories. I mean, we always got our trees from the grocery store, so I don't have anything as exciting as that.
Yeah, yeah. It was just something that my mom insisted on every year, and it just became a sort of a tradition thing. And so it was a thing. But yeah, I think the candles remind me of that too. It is that comforting,
Mm-hmm.
like it brings up that nostalgia for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm. All right. Well, now that we've talked about scents and all of that jazz, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing from you guys. So please comment your own insights and stories as well, like, subscribe, and ready? All right, let's dive in. So Vox Machina, they have just returned to Amman after a visit to Vasselheim and were invited to have dinner at the castle with Sovereign Uriel to help keep an eye on the visiting Briarwoods, the family from Whitestone that has a dark history with Percy's family. The dinner has been set to happen in about a week, so in the meantime, the group finishes up their meal as the household staff of their keep raises the delicate issue of non-payment. The group is told that the staff is interested in being paid in advance since the group tends to leave them on for extended periods of time. Vex agrees easily and asks how much they are paid, bringing the total to 600 gold pieces per month for the entire staff. Vex and Bax offer to pay for the month from their personal funds since the group funds are looking pretty pathetic at the moment, and Vex reassures them that they will always be paid from Vox Machina. Tiberius offers to pay another month in advance, and then Vex says that she is going to find Percy, and Keyleth agrees, saying they should all go, while Tiberius heads off to the Alabaster Lyceum to do some research on the teleportation circles there. The rest of the group heads to Percy's workshop, where he has retreated to after hearing news of the Briarwoods' invitation to Amon, and they find Percy, who says he's busy working on some projects. Vex says, quite the worker. So, darling. And Vax says, I think we need a bit of a history lesson. Percy tells Grog not to touch anything in the workshop, and Keyleth tells Percy that it's quite obvious that he's distressed and they're concerned, asking why exactly he was in a prison cell when they first found him. Vax says they never wanted to make him uncomfortable, so they never brought it up, and Percy replies, I know, you're right, but pauses before saying anything more. Grog asks, should we guess? Was it public nudity? And Percy laughs and says, a bit. He says he's never had to say it out loud before. He's never had this discussion with anyone. Scanlan says, it's okay, it gets better. He tells them that Lord and Lady Briarwood are responsible for the death of his entire family. Whitestone was his home. He came from a big family, and one night the Briarwoods were invited into their home. Over the course of the night, the Briarwoods slaughtered everyone. He says that the few survivors of Castle Whitestone survived through deceit and by working for the Briarwoods. He says that he was lost for quite a while after that happened, and because he had nothing else in his life other than his family. He was not the heir, and he wasn't ever going to be the head of the family. So afterwards, after that night, he decided that if nothing else, he survived to extract some vengeance, set something right, stop what they are doing. It took a year, but he had chased one of the Briarwoods party members down, Dr. Anna Ripley. In his attempt to make contact with her, her guards captured him, beat him up, and threw him in that prison cell that the group pre-Vox Machina had found him in. Scanlan asks if he could identify Anna Ripley now, and Percy says, oh yes. Vex asks how he got away that night if the rest of his family was killed. He says that his younger sister Cassandra had also managed to evade capture and she set him free, but he doesn't know what became of her or any of his siblings. Vax asks if he witnessed their deaths, and he says that he saw bodies, but it's mostly a blur. Scanlan asks how long ago it was, and he says 4 or 5 years. Vex asks, if you know that they murdered your family, how are they still part of society? He replies that he doesn't really know. He could have gone home at any point and checked, but he's been too scared to. Keyleth asks if the Briarwoods are still in Whitestone, and he says that he just discovered about a week ago that they still were, according to Sovereign Uriel. Vex asks if they will recognize him, and he says he doesn't know. Grog asks these pricks are still in good standing with the council and Amon. Percy says he doesn't really know what to do. He's preparing for anything for this dinner. When he got thrown into that prison cell, he realized that he wasn't going about it in the right way, and he prayed for a sign. Then the rest of Vox Machina showed up, and he's been trusting that they will take him where he needs to go. Vax asks for details of his family's deaths, and Percy says that there was an interrogation beforehand. Ripley had been asking questions about the castle, but it was a long time ago, and he was not equipped for torture back then. Grog asks if he wants them dead, and Percy says he thinks so. Vex asks if they should interrogate them first, and Grog says, or just skip ahead to the dead part. Percy shows them his gun, where on the 6 barrels of the gun, 5 of them have names engraved. Lord and Lady Briarwood are 2, Ripley is another, Sir Stonefall and Professor Anders are also there, along with the blank space. He says they were all members of the same party, but he doesn't know if they traveled together. He tells them that Stonefall was the captain of the Briarwoods Guard, and Anders was his teacher, Percy's tutor from childhood, and he seemingly was in collusion with the Briarwoods. He was the one that Percy believes allowed them to take the castle that night. Keyleth asks if he remembers why they were invited to Whitestone to begin with, and he says they were traveling. It was his brother Julius and sister Vesper who handled matters of court. Keyleth asks how many siblings he had, and he answers 6. But Vex rushes to add that he might still have 6. They don't know for sure what happened to them. Keyleth asks if he can remember the bodies he saw, and he says it was just a blur. Scanlan asks for the details of the dinner that is set to happen in a week, and Vex says that she thinks they need to do some spying. Scanlan asks if the Briarwoods know that Percy is among them, and Percy tells them that they don't have to get involved in this, but Vex interrupts him and says, oh, we are so involved. Scanlan backs her up and says they are one, and Grog says, yeah, we do. You said you want them dead. It's done. Vex confirms by saying, we've got your back, darling. Vax says, Percival, you don't really have a choice in the matter. My sister and I know a little piece of your pain. They will find reparations for Percy, and they will. Keyleth asks to confirm that this is what he wants, and he says there's only one way to find out. Scanlan jokes, and if we kill them, how much will you pay us? They all laugh, and, Scanlan adds some lighthearted humor in it. Vex adds, if we see them and we're not ready to show our faces, will you be able to contain yourself? Percy says he thinks so. Keyleth asks again if they will be able to recognize his face, and he replies that he was planning on wearing the hat of disguise, just in case. Scanlan suggests that they can find him a bushy mustache disguise. It has worked for him many times, but Percy says that he thinks a mustache suits Scanlan better. They discuss the functionality of the hat of disguise for a bit, while Grog, unable to help himself, reaches over and grabs a shiny tool in Percy's workshop. He tries to sneak it into the bag of holding, but Vex catches him doing it. She gives him the evil eye, and he puts it back. Vax says that they have 7 days so they can make Percy look like anyone. They can talk to the right people, get the right paperwork, and no one will know the difference. Percy adds that he can forge paperwork as well, and Scanlan says that he can make them all into birds. They start talking about what they're going to do with the week downtime in between, and discuss how long it will take to get to Craghammer and get the money that is waiting for them. Keyleth also argues that they need to do some research on the Briarwoods, figure out who they are. Vax says that they don't know if they are straight up gangster or if there's something supernatural going on. He says that the hat of disguise will work on 80% of people, but he doesn't know if the Briarwoods are in that 20% of people who would be able to see right through it. Scanlan says that the rest of them, since they are unrecognizable to the Briarwoods, could do some recon in the meantime, and Grog agrees, saying that they haven't seen all the brothels in Amon yet. Scanlan suggests that part of the group goes and gets the money from Craghammer, and part of the group goes and does some research. Beck says that, or asks if they should wait, and Percy says that the people in his family get married for money, so it's perfectly reasonable to split up the party in this situation. Vax asks Kiki, his nickname for Keyleth, if she and Scanlan can fly to Craghammer. She says yes, but she will need to stop by and speak with Gilmore first beforehand. As they discuss more details, Grog leaves and heads to the kitchen for something to eat. Percy asks them to leave him a message earring, and if they're all leaving because he's not leaving his workshop. And Keyleth asks if anyone else needs anything while she's out and about. Grog comes back and offers Percy his earring, but realizes that his hands are starting to burn where he touched the tongs he tried to steal from the workshop previously. He turns to Percy and says, "Quick question. Sorry, I kept something from falling in the workshop earlier, and it's making my bits tingle. Do you have anything for that?" Vax asks, "You haven't been scratching yourself, have you?" Grog says, No, I had that before, not the same thing." Percy says there's a bucket of water in the corner. You can try that. Grog dumps his hand in the water, but it makes it worse because it's acid, and he starts huffing at the pain. Percy hands him a bag of powder and says, "Now you've learned the lesson of touching anything in my workshop." Grog asks, "What do I do with a bag of powder?" And Percy pours the powder. Wow, Percy pours the powder. Say that 10 times fast. On his hands as Grog sighs in relief. Percy says he's a good friend, and Grog heads back to the kitchen. Keyleth asks if anyone wants to tag along with her to Gilmore's, and Vax agrees a bit begrudgingly. And Scanlan also says he's coming too. Meanwhile, Tiberius makes his way to the Alabaster Lyceum and approaches the desk clerk, introduces himself, and asks for a teleportation circle sigil to Craghammer, perhaps through the Thunderbaron family. The clerk says that he will need to speak with the gatekeeper Xanthus, and Tiberius asks, "Where is he? I thought that was you." The clerk replies that no, he's just the clerk that runs the front desk, and asks Tiberius to follow him as he leads him to the Traverse Junction where the gatekeeper is sitting. Tiberius introduces himself again and repeats his request again, and is told that the specific room he seeks with the circle to Craghammer is kept under lock and key. Tiberius is told that he would need to speak with the headmaster, Thurmond Adalum, in order to procure access. Tiberius asks again, "Where is he? Can you take me to him? Where is he at?" Xanthus looks at the clerk, who then leads Tiberius through a long hallway and back to a large and opulent office where the elderly headmaster sits at a desk. Tiberius introduces himself again, repeats his request again, and the headmaster confirms that he is looking for access to one of the Thunderbrand sigils. He says yes, and the headmaster pulls out a mirror along with a chest containing about 24 marbles in all different shapes and colors. They each have a label, and he takes out one to place it on top of the mirror. It shimmers and turns into a blue surface. He calls hello into it a few times, and eventually another voice responds. The headmaster asks if he recognizes Tiberius and turns the mirror toward him to where Tiberius can see the visage of the dwarf that they had originally met at the Thunderbrand house in Craghammer. Tiberius tells him that Vox Machina had retrieved some things for them in the Underdark as they promised they would, and would like to deliver them to them as soon as possible. The dwarf rants a bit about their last encounter when Vox Machina forced entry into their home, and Tiberius makes some excuses for their behavior in his usual Tiberius manner. The dwarf says, "Either way, we can't just let anyone willy-nilly know how to directly appear in the center of our homestead." Tiberius talks up his noble birth, giving word that he would never abuse the access to their home. He guarantees it on his name as a Stormwind, but the dwarf demands to see one of the artifacts that they retrieved for them from the Underdark, and Tiberius says that he doesn't have it on his person at the moment. The dwarf says they're done, and the mirror shimmers back to its original state. The headmaster apologizes that it didn't seem to go Tiberius's way, and he says, "It's fine, I'll be back in about 15 minutes with the proper proof." He exits immediately, and once he gets outside, casts Fly on himself to fly back to the keep as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Vax, Keyleth, and Scanlan head to Gilmore's and find no sign of Gilmore, but do see Sherry, his assistant. She greets them, and Vax asks if she remembers them. Keyleth adds, "Vox Machina, we're sponsored by Gilmore. He put the brand on my armor that my mother gave me." And she says yes, she remembers. They ask after Gilmore and say they're hoping to catch up with him, and are told that he is in Westruun, setting up the expansion location of Gilmore's glorious goods. If it is important enough, she could summon him to Amon, though. They express sadness in not being able to see him decline, opting to send a message to him instead. Vax tells Sherry to tell Gilmore that he and his friends visited the shop and that they're in Amon for a week. She pulls out some magic paper and writes a message telling Gilmore that if he's back in Amon before the week is up, then Vax would be very interested in exchanging news. She sends the paper and says that she'll convey whatever response she receives. Keyleth asks if they had the chance to talk about the alchemy workshop that they spoke about last time she was in, or if there were any alchemy books that came in the meantime. Sherry says it's possible and she can go check, but is interrupted by a vibrant white flash of light and a sound from the back room. The beaded curtains shift, and pushing through with a bead of sweat on his forehead is Gilmore. He calls enthusiastically to them, "I'm so glad you're back." They greet him and he apologizes, saying that he was out running some business. Vax says he didn't have to go through all the trouble of returning to them so quickly, and Gilmore says that he couldn't miss seeing them. Vax walks up to him and gives him a good European-style kiss on the cheek. I put kiss on the kiss. Don't know why I put that up there. Saying there is so much we need to talk about. Where can we be alone? Gilmore says, well, I mean, but of course. And Vax tells the rest of the group to see to business. And Scanlan says they'll do some window shopping as Gilmore leads Vax into his back office behind the beaded curtain. It is nicely decorated and the rug is pulled back slightly, revealing a circle of teleportation that has been inscribed into the floor, seemingly for Gilmore's personal use. He sits down with Gilmore and says, before we talk about anything, I feel like I should apologize because although we didn't have any sort of written agreement, you and I are friends, aren't we? Gilmore says yes, and Vax continues saying, I was supposed to help bring your brand wherever we went, and I thought that that would be possible. He says, we came from the Underdark and had a very hard time, some of the hardest weeks of my life, and I haven't delivered on my promise. I mean to, but I haven't yet. I apologize wholeheartedly. Gilmore says it's all right. He understands. He appreciates Vax being so honest, and Vax launches into the whole story of the Underdark and of getting the Horn of Orcus. With some rewinding time later in the episode, we go back to this scene. So Vax lays his hand on Gilmore's after telling this story and asks him about Amon, asking about Sovereign Uriel in particular. Gilmore tells him that as far as he's aware, Amon has been doing rather well. Trade is booming. Gilmore's opening a second shop. They talk a bit about the expansion, and Vax says that Gilmore's a busy man, asking if he has any time for leisure. Gilmore says eventually, only subtly hinting at how exhausted he really is. Vax asks if there's anything he can do to help, and Gilmore replies, just praise the brand. Praise the brand, young Vax. Vax also asks about the teleportation circle that he noticed entering the office and asks if Gilmore has any way for them to get to Craghammer, but is told that this particular circle is only for Gilmore's returning to Amon, not outgoing. Gilmore directs him to the Lyceum instead, saying that he is owed a favor or two from them so he can try to arrange something. He pulls out a piece of magic paper and writes a message on it, sending it off and saying, I just did you a favor, keep that in mind. Vax asks one last question, saying he needs a dagger, but they're low on funds until they get to Craghammer. He asks for a bit of credit, purchasing 3 low-level enchantment daggers for 400 gold each. While that goes on, Sherry looks for some books for Keyleth on the properties of various liquids and other alchemy components. Keyleth tries to haggle for the price, but rolls a natural 1 on her persuasion check, so Scanlan has to step in for her. It still doesn't work, so Keyleth asks Scanlan to buy the books for her, and Scanlan asks for a small box that could carry a magic item and shield it from protection. Sherry retrieves some and he hits on her, attempting to sweet talk her as he discusses prices with her. He asks for her opinion, saying that she's a woman of the world, and asks her to pick the box for him. He also asks if she can identify a vial of red liquid for him. He rolls a 31 on his persuasion check, and she gives him the identify spell on the house, telling him that it's a potion of fire breath. He also asks where he might be able to get some business cards printed in Amman, and she directs him to a print facility right up the road. He then finishes up by asking about the books Keyleth wanted, saying that he would be willing to pay even more than she asked for, as well as compose Sherry a song. For the first time since they started patronizing Gilmore's, they see a slight grin start to creep across Sherry's face. And she says, how can a lady say no to a song? She sticks firm to the price she stated before, and Scanlon pays, then serenades her in his classic bard fashion. She blushes, clearing her throat as Keyleth druid crafts Scanlon a flower to give to Sherry, which he promptly hands over. She thanks him, completely red in the face, and at that point, Vax and Gilmore emerge from the back office. Gilmore announces, we're in business, as he heads off to find the three daggers for Vax, who pinches his cheek and thanks him for his trust. Vax greets Scanlon and Keyleth again, and Scanlon asks, how did it go in there? You're walking straight, so I'm guessing it didn't go too well. Vax tugs at his collar, commenting on how hot it is in the shop, and they all take their leave. Meanwhile, Tiberius reaches the keep and narrowly avoids 2 crossbow bolts that their guards shoot at him before realizing that it's Tiberius. He heads inside and finds Grog, who is still eating in the kitchen. Reaching into the bag of holding, he starts searching for the items they retrieved from the Underdark for the Thunderbrand family. Vex walks into the kitchen, finding him groping around in the bag blindly, and Grog asks Tiberius what he's looking for. He explains and finally finds the sapphire amulet that is engraved with the phrase, "To Lorna, my love." Tiberius explains that he's working on a way to get them to Craghammer quickly, and Vex asks if she can accompany him. Tiberius casts Fly on both Vex and Grog, then darts out of the keep once more. Vex follows him, but Grog decides to stay, floating and bouncing off the ceiling above his meal as he continues to eat it. He eventually gains control over his flying and swims down and continues to eat. Vex keeps an eye out for the rest of the party as they fly across town and spy Vax, Keyleth, and Scanlon. She calls out to Vax over the message earring and informs him of their plan. Tiberius casts Fly on Vax, Keyleth, and Scanlon, asking them to follow, but the fly spell that he cast previously on Vex himself and Grog fades away after 2 rounds, 12 seconds, and they find themselves plummeting to the ground. Tiberius casts Fly again at 6th level in order to affect Vax, Vex, Keyleth, Scanlon, and himself in one go. They all reach the Alabaster Lyceum, and Tiberius asks if they can go straight to the headmaster this time. The clerk waves them on, and they find the headmaster at his desk once again, who tells them that he received the note from Gilmore, and they are authorized to use one of their sigils now. But Tiberius says that he doesn't want to use that favor for the sigil to Craghammer, wanting to provide proof that was requested instead. He would like to use the Gilmore favor for a sigil to Vasselheim, but is told that there are no sigils to the Divine City because of their deep dislike of all things arcane. The headmaster rambles on, giving a history of Vasselheim and its conflicts, but Vex interrupts him and compliments him for his knowledge, but asks him again to hurry with their request. He pulls out the mirror and marble and calls into it once again as the same voice returns from before. Tiberius shows the pendant to the mirror, providing the proof the dwarf asked for, and the dwarf finally gives his permission. The headmaster directs the clerk to lead them to the Thunderbrand sigil, and they discuss who is going to go. Vex, Tiberius, and Scanlon decide to head to Craghammer, while Vax and Keyleth decide to stay in Amman, but Tiberius realizes that he can't even cast Circle of Teleportation right now because he used all of his high-level spells for flying. So they decide to sleep for the night and head out the next day, since it's getting close to dusk anyway. And on the way back to the keep, Tiberius stops by a blacksmith to ask if they can combine some daggers to make a bent glaive of sorts. It kind of sounds like a really murderous rake, the way that he describes it. He dallies for a bit, complimenting her on the armor that she made for Trinket. By the time he comes out, Scanlon cast Minor Illusion on himself to imitate a long gray beard, saying, "Can we go home now, please?" They head back to the keep as Vax stealths away from the group, looking for Harold the Butcher. The rest of the group finds Grog asleep at the kitchen table, and Percy is nowhere to be seen, crafting bullets in his workshop. Tiberius tries to put some poison on his crossbow bolts, but is unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Vax finds the butcher he's looking for and looks around for a bit. He spies Harold closing up the shop for the day, but finds no evidence of Kynan anywhere. He watches Harold stealthily for a bit until the butcher leaves, then sneaks into a window. He pushes open one of the interior doors and finds a bedchamber, seemingly belonging to a young man, but with no one inside. He creeps out of the window, then heads to the front of the building, knocks on the door. Harold greets him, but says that he's closed for the day. Bax says that he's not looking to buy anything, but he owes Harold's son some money and would like to get it to him. Harold says that he doesn't know where his son is, that they got into an argument and he left. He says it's not the first time he's done this and he'll be back. Bax leaves 50 gold with Harold and then leaves, intuiting that the man is more interested in the contents of what's being handed to him rather than conveying it to the intended recipient. Bax heads back to the keep and they retire for the night, and that's where they break for the episode. So what do we think of this first half?
Yeah, I mean, this episode is when we really start getting into the like deep plot stuff. I mean, this is when the Briarwoods, like they're preparing for the Briarwoods, and we get some Percy backstory. And this is often, I mean, I know people often skip the part with Tiberius, but this is the bit that leads into that whole plot line. And so it really kind of feels like I know that the first, like the episodes we've already talked about have already also been part of the campaign, but now it really feels like we're actually getting into the campaign, because this is where, like, in the general opinion of the fandom, like it actually starts.
Yeah. I mean, this is where the major arcs start. It's no
Mhm.
longer Monster of the Week, Dungeon of the Week, Quest of the Week, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where we get into also, like, we've talked about this a little bit in podcast episodes, but like the nuances of character choices and character dialogue in this is
Mhm.
super interesting. Like, one, I want to point out
Yeah.
Vex here. Vex is super interesting in this first half. Like,
Mhm.
because we all know of her as the greedy, money loving charmer that she is, right? But she is the one to immediately offer the household staff their pay and
Mhm.
offers to pay it out of her personal funds and doesn't even ask the rest of the group to contribute. Vax offered on his own accord to go halvesies with her on it. And that's very uncharacteristic for her. But at the same time, I think we learn later on in this campaign that it is actually characteristic for her.
Yeah, I think it's really telling that it, because we know that the money, like we know from later on that her love of money doesn't necessarily come from like any sort of greed. It's actually coming from like a want of like security and status and stuff like that. So of course it's important to her to make sure that her staff are like well looked after.
Yeah. And I think we're also starting to see more evidence of Scanlan's role in the group of all of this
Mm-hmm.
too, because we've had some very serious conversations in this first half, like especially revolving around Percy and his capital T trauma.
Yes.
And while the rest of the group, I think, is very much weighted by the capital T trauma that he's lore dropping in this episode, Scanlan definitely makes an effort to lighten the mood and joke throughout this entire thing and be the one that breaks up the tensions that are created
Mm-hmm.
too. Because we've also seen a very significant increase in inner character tension in the last few episodes. Like,
Yes.
they are not agreeing on courses of action right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially Keyleth v. the rest of the group. And
Yes.
I think we start seeing why Keyleth can be such a burr for a lot of audience members, because she's the one that will go counter to group more often than I think the rest of the characters do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's always the one's like, but let's think about this. Let's think about the
Yeah.
moral implications of this. And I think that she's the only one in the group who's capable and willing of being that squeaky wheel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very
Yeah, for
interesting
sure.
character dynamics going on in this first half.
Yeah, and then of course there's Tiberius, as always. We're getting close to his exit, but are
I
not
mean, they are
quite
so
there.
tired of his shit at this point. They are
Oh, they
so
really
tired
are.
of his shit.
They really are. Like him casting those fly spells
Yeah,
and
and Matt knew what he was doing the whole time. Like Matt, you could tell the look on Matt's face when Tiberius has the realization that he doesn't have the spells for Circle of Teleportation. He's like, yeah,
uh-huh.
I knew this was coming because you were using up all your spells for stupid shit.
Yeah. Like sixth level. Like, yeah, if you're doing like a joke, either do it at a time when you know that you're done everything for the day,
Yeah.
or like, or use a low level spell. Like, spells can be good for bits sometimes, but you kind of have to like read the situation and know whether you're needed and whether you're like, and even like doing it like close to the end of the day, you never know if combat's going to come upon you in the middle of the night. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a time and a place for using high level spells as jokes, and this clearly was poorly timed.
And I think a lot of his actions, I mean, this is a huge, huge thing in the community with the way this whole thing went down, was like they're so bordering the line of gaming and the way
Oh yeah.
decides to do a lot of the things. Like him leaving and not telling anyone is a theme that we've been seeing a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
And Keyleth / Marisha kind of calls him out for it in this episode. I didn't put it in the summary because it was side talk that didn't necessarily happen in canonical time.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the difficulty with a lot of this dialogue, is that like some of it happens outside of canon and I have to decide which is important enough to include in the summary or not.
Yeah.
But even like Marisha and Orion have a little bit of a spat in the middle of this, of being like, you didn't tell anyone where you were going. We have no idea where you are right now. We have no idea what your plan is for Craghammer. And like, I think it's just very frustrating for them on the other end, because they are trying so hard not to metagame in the
Yeah.
scenario as well. And like the whole message earring kind of breaks that sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And it's just interesting to see where they dance around these boundaries of gameplay.
For sure. And like, yeah, and like the digging through Grog's bag without like asking him, and just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of interesting character choices. I honestly think we get more interesting character choices out of combat scenarios than in combat scenarios. Like they're on downtime in Amon right now. And so I think they get a lot more freedom in their character choices than they would if they were like in a dungeon somewhere fighting something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we see a lot more
Absolutely.
nuance.
Yeah, like I know when I'm doing combat in D&D, it often becomes a bit more like formulaic and strategic. Like I'll
Yeah.
find something that works and I'll stick to that for the combat, usually for my tactics. Um and like whereas in like these moments of role play, it's like more dynamic. You don't know what's going to come up in what sort of situations, and it's a lot more, at least in the way that I play D&D, that's how I find.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think the group is just trying to find, like, I think a lot of them were hoping that this trip home would be a palate cleanser,
Mhm.
neutralizer, some type of like coming back to shared ground, reestablishing our bond as a group. And then like the Briarwoods dropped. And then Tiberius is just being Tiberius. And like
Yeah.
all of these like they're kind of splintering more so than coming together in this. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
Grog's choosing to stay home and eat instead of dealing with all of the little errands that were going on. Like, I think that is a strong.
Yeah, Grog doesn't do anything other than like eat most of the time for this episode, or
Eat,
at least
fight,
this
and
part of the
fuck,
episode.
right? Eat, fight, and fuck.
I didn't see that as like problematic. I just saw it as like something like there wasn't particularly anything for his character to do, and so he was just having fun with it. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
everybody else was handling things. It didn't seem like something that was like a source of conflict. It's not like people were trying to get Grog to do things and he wasn't. It was just more that
yeah.
he was resting. He was having downtime.
I mean, I just think it's a good example of the difference between expectations and reality. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think some members of the group, and I think Keyleth is definitely one of the more significant members in this category, want the downtime to be bonding time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's the one that talked about like having, uh bar hopping and like tavern
Mm-hmm.
hopping activities and like going to see museums while they're in town and like making it more into like a vacay more so than them just reestablishing. And I think that Bex is also part of that category as well.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that like it's very Taurus energy. She wants to like nest, she wants to have that safety and stability that you're talking about, and that's what the keep provides for her at this point.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because it kind of mirrors how like time off and downtime works for people in real life, because
Mm,
people often, and even people can have different expectations and different needs and wants depending on like what time it is for them. It's not even like vary from person to person. It can vary for an individual from time to time. But
mhm.
like sometimes downtime for people is a time to like do errands and get a bunch of things done. Sometimes it's a time to like go out and be social and do events and have like a fun vacation time.
Totally.
Sometimes it's just like hunkering down in your house and just like physically resting. And
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's kind of cool that we see this with Percy, sometimes downtime is a time that things that have been like hitting and like triggering can actually open up, and it's a time to process trauma. And I think that's very cool because oftentimes when we see downtime, we see a lot of these like more like fun or more restful things, but it's kind of cool how it lined up that with like the Briarwoods coming up, that for Percy, it's very much a time of like him just like being triggered and trying to figure out how he's going to move forward. And that is something that I think people don't talk about a lot in downtime. Like I know that I've had periods of my life where when I've had days off of work or whatever, a lot of it has just been like processing mental health stuff and like
Yeah.
working through that sort of stuff. And so I think it's cool that we get a representation of that alongside everything else.
Yeah. Like I'm kind of worried about Vax too.
Mm-hmm.
The way that he talked to Gilmore, I think the last couple adventures that they've had have impacted him more than A, he's letting on, and B, I think the rest of the group realizes.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he went into such great detail in explaining the Underdark adventure and quest and Horn of Orcus thing with Gilmore. I mean, it's obviously still very significant for him. And he even,
Yeah.
I think in the last episode, he mentioned something about how like we almost died in that temple, which I think was in reference to the Rakshasa fight as well.
Yeah.
And so he's talking about this stuff a lot more than the rest of the group right now. And he's
Mm-hmm.
focusing on this stuff a lot more than the rest of the group right now.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, for sure. And so it's kind of like not also just like the trauma of like big past traumatic events, but also just like some of their experience that they have. Because when you think about it, adventuring in a D&D party, we always think of it as just like, oh, fun adventure. But a lot of the stuff that like D&D parties face, particularly in Critical Role, is like incredibly traumatic.
yeah,
You see people die, you see people in dangerous situations, you see people get badly hurt and have the like concern about them dying. There's like all of these, you're constantly in life and death situations. And
yeah,
so it's cool to see reflecting on like the impact that has, because I think that's a lot of the time people just like brush aside of being like, oh, it's part of the like it's part of the like genre and
mhm,
like maybe they'll process something if something like hits their particular character's backstory or something like that. But other than that, just kind of like brush it aside as if like nothing had happened. And so it's cool to see how this impacted him, because when you think about it, if like we as people went out and went on these adventures, like we would come back with so much trauma.
Yeah, I'd be in bed for a month. Like, and I think it all stemmed from that conversation that they had in the tavern in Vasselheim when the two groups came back together after the trial take quests.
Yeah.
Because both halves of the group were like, no, we hurt more. No, we were challenged more. No, we almost died. Like they never validated each other's experiences in that. Like, well, we fought a dragon. Well, we fought a Rakshasa. Like we're the ones more at danger there, you know? And so I don't think they ever processed that as a group, because I think they all just brushed past each other's traumatic experiences that happened in each of those quests. And I think that that's the root of the splintering that we're now seeing in Amon, because none of them were validated.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's something that we see a lot in real life as well. If people, a lot of times certain conflict comes up is because two people are experiencing fallouts from different kinds of trauma, and they're worried that if they like, they're more worried about getting their own stuff acknowledged rather than like actually hearing the other person and realizing, oh no, both of these traumas are valid and we both have stuff going on and let's find a way to work through it. Like I think oftentimes that can be like the fallout of like a lot of friendships, is like people like go through these periods of time where both parties are going through some really intense stuff. And then they don't know how to handle the other person's stuff. And so they make it into a problem and hurt each other in the process.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why it was so important for Vax to speak to Gilmore in this.
Yeah.
Because Gilmore provided him the validation that none of the rest of the group provided him.
For sure. Because Gilmore is outside of it. And I think sometimes that can be important, is to recognize when you're in the midst of something and with other people in the midst of something. Sometimes the other people who are in the midst of something aren't the best support to somebody outside of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect segue into the next section of what personal experiences are coming to mind for us here.
Yeah, I mean, digging into this conflict thing, there is one big thing in particular. It kind of reminds me of, I had like a former best friend, and we kind of fell apart in a time. I won't go into too many details because it's personal stuff, but I honestly think that the root of it, aside from some bits where she was like genuinely like slightly like not very nice towards me, is that I think ultimately what led to us falling apart is that we had different needs for our mental health struggles and we couldn't see what was going on, and we were both going through really rough times. And so just kind of like, I mean, just remembering that fallout and wondering if things could have been different if we had both been in healthier places.
Man, right? Like I wish they taught mental health awareness and like psychology and neuroscience as part of like the general curriculum in schools, because I think so many relationships can be saved just by baseline level awareness for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very similar thing. Like I had a best friend all throughout high school who I was very close to, but the minute we approached graduation, the minute it became clear that I was basically leaving the state for college and moving on to the rest of my life, and she was staying in the same town that we had grown up in, and like that was also a very big splitting point for us. And she decided to, pick things to get mad about as a result that were not even related to me basically leaving her behind, is like how I'm sure she did it, you know what I mean? And our relationship never recovered from that because she took defensive stances on issues that were really non-issues related to the big issue. And I think that we're also seeing that happen in Vox Machina here as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's so much deflection that can come on about like, I'm really mad about this. I'm not even, whether you're aware that you're mad about the first thing or not, you can choose things to be mad about elsewhere in the relationship.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's easier to get mad about things that you aren't actually mad about because the things that you're actually mad about hurt too much.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating to see how people handle conflict like that. Like the whole emotional validation thing is a huge theme in my life too. And like that's broken a lot of my relationships over the years when I haven't gotten the emotional validation that I've needed from that relationship. And that's actually like going into what actions are we personally called to make here is I've actually had to make it a conscious practice to validate myself or find ways to validate myself so that I don't put that unnecessary or the weight of that on people around me, because I can take care of some of that, not all of it, but some of it.
For sure. And for me, I think it's a similar thing too. Because I mean, it wasn't all my former best friend's fault that things fell apart. I know that there was a lot of ways that she was, like, I recognize in retrospect that she was pretty controlling of me and wasn't very nice to me, but I also recognize that in my own mental health crises, I wasn't treating her the best as well. And I think just sort of like recognizing when something that I've learned over the past few years since that whole thing happened is like recognizing when I'm upset about something in regards to another person, whether it is actually that person's fault and something that needs to be addressed with that person, or whether that's something to take within myself and deal with on my own, because those emotions are still valid.
Yeah.
But just because you're feeling those emotions are connected to another person doesn't mean you need to confront the other person. Sometimes it's just like I'm feeling hurt because of my own things, and it's not actually their fault. They're doing things that are just fine, and it just happens to like hurt me. Like, for example, I'll take an example of like, say if I have plans to hang out with somebody and I'm really banking on those plans because I'm a very extroverted person and hanging out with people is something that really energizes me. Yeah. And all of a sudden the other person has something going on and they have to cancel those plans. Yeah. Sometimes I have a strong emotional reaction to that because I bank on a lot, but really, and really, like, I've learned over the years that if I think about it, that it's not actually their fault for canceling. They would do the thing if they could. They have other circumstances going on that means that they can't, and it's not them rejecting me. It's just them like just running into circumstances outside of their control. And so that's something that I've learned over the years is when I feel those emotions, when like plans get canceled, is to like take those emotions within those myself, feel them if they need to be felt, but work on them within myself. And maybe if I need to talk to somebody outside of that, but not place the blame on that person for canceling.
Yeah, it's yes and, right?
Exactly.
It's not no but, and like that lesson from improv from D&D can be applied to so many things. It's like it's not just one or the other, it's both most of the time.
For sure. And I honestly think that a lot of relationships would be a lot healthier if people actually took the time to stop and think if like, oh, am I actually upset because it's the other person's fault, or am I upset because I have other hurts and traumas within me and I need to deal with this myself and not drag them into it and make them feel bad for something outside of their control.
Yeah, but it can also be taken to toxic levels too. Like if we
Oh,
look
for
at
sure.
Percy, you know, he's so like, I don't want you to get too involved. I'll go handle this on my own. Like, I'm just going to hide away in my workshop. None of you have to deal with any of my emotions. Like,
For sure.
that's the other end of the spectrum, right?
It's about finding a balance.
Yeah.
Is that there are times, I think the distinction for me is that, like, because like what I'm talking about is a specific situation where my emotions are like leading me to want to place the blame on somebody who doesn't deserve it. And those are times to sort of like take it within yourself, and if you need somebody else to talk to somebody outside of that. But like with Percy, that's more of like a big personal stuff, and
Yeah.
he doesn't want people to get involved. But there are times when, like, yes, it is important to open up to people and share what you are dealing with, because that's what friends are for, are to help you.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like gaining the emotional intelligence to be able to determine what
Absolutely.
is needed at a point when you are feeling triggered. And it's different for everybody, and it's different for every situation.
And it takes
And
practice.
it takes practice, and it sucks because sometimes when you like make the wrong choice, it hurts people, but that's part of being human, and and I think it's important to also have grace for people when they make those wrong decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I don't know if I have anything to add to that, honestly. Like, I think that's a great thing to end on, honestly, is like talking about balance and practice. I think those are just fundamental concepts that I think we forget often.
For sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And life is messy, and the world is messy, and emotions are messy. People are getting hurt all the time, and people hurt other people all the time. And sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anything you want to add before we wrap up for today?
I can't think of anything. I think once again, as I say all the time, if I continue on, I'm going to talk for another half hour. So I
Yeah,
think
I
I
know.
have to cut it off here.
Yeah, we can route our way to each of our soapboxes very easily through this.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about per usual. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how episodes and Critical Role and the cast and the whole shebang has impacted you in your own lives as well. We'd love, thanks. I just keep reading the same lines over and over again. So special thanks to Petall for joining me on this episode. It's been a pleasure. Next time, we'll be talking about Campaign 1, Episode 24, Part 2. And joining me again will be Petall for that. And there's
Ooh.
some like stuff that drops in the second half of this episode. So I am
Oh,
like,
I completely forget everything that happens. I'm
oh,
excited
it's
to
it's
watch it.
it's an exciting second half. I was like, how much are we gonna get to? It's an exciting second half.
Well,
So
the good news is that next time I won't be all up on cold medicine when I watch the second half. So I'll
yeah.
be able to retain
Yeah.
more in my
we'll
brain
have
there.
we'll have a lot to talk about next time.
Yes.
So as always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests. So if you're interested, hit me up. I'll send you the link. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below. Follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, everyone.